What's up, tea snobs? In this video, we're gonna be looking at 9 different factors to determining the perfect teapot. But because it's as much of an art as it is a science, we're also gonna look at, does it actually matter or is it marketing? A lot of times we get the what, but not the why. Hi, I'm Dart. The first thing we're gonna look at is the line of symmetry, first from front to back and then across the top. It's pretty common if you drank any amount of tea to look at this line of symmetry, first saying it matters and then saying it doesn't, but the why actually tells us why it does matter but doesn't need to be that way. Let me explain. The line we're talking about is from the spout to the top of the body to the handle, if it creates a perfectly straight line. And the same when you're looking at it from the top. As you start brewing more and more tea, you'll see that not every teapot follows the horizontal rule, but the vertical or top down one is definitely a sign of craftsmanship. What actually matters, and the reason we're looking for the symmetry line, is you're getting a good balance when you're pouring. If the handle is too low, it pours too far and the teapot lid could fall off or it feels uncomfortable or not ergonomic. So doing the cute chopstick trick is definitely marketing, but there is matter underneath for this one. The next one is lid fit or lid variance. This largely depends on 2 things. 1, the way the pot is seated, and 2, the craftsmanship or intentionality of the artist. For pots that are gallery seated, there's a little indent that goes down where the lid sits. If these don't have a good lid fit, it's probably a low quality teapot. For top seated pots though, even some of my favorite pots have a little bit of lid variance. The only way to get this perfect lid fit is to be sanded or lapped after it's fired. You can't fire a teapot to the exact perfect fit. Definitely more marketing, and the reason is if a potter fires a pot that is the exact size and there's less variance than somebody who grinds it down, that's equally as impressive even if there's more lid variance. Does that make sense? Yeah. You wanna get there first thing in the morning? Drink some Oolong. Pouring smoothness, speed, and height. Pouring smoothness and speed is largely determined by the shape of the spout, whether it's a straight line or a cone, and then secondarily, how the filter interacts on the inside of the teapot. All these pots have filters on the inside, which we'll talk about later. But note, if you ever see a teapot being tested or poured with water, it's going to pour better with that water than it will with tea because there's more friction once the tea is poured through it. Makes sense. So that makes certain teas in certain pots more suitable for better, smoother pouring, if you care about that. Going back to that symmetry line though, the reason that the spout on the 45-degree angle and position so it's even with the top matters is when you fill up the teapot, it's not going to leak out the end. And even more importantly when you're pouring, that it doesn't leak out the top. So it doesn't need to be perfectly aligned with the top, but if the spout is too low, you also have an adverse effect, like if the handle is too low. So pouring smoothness and speed matter, pouring height is totally marketing. Wow. The shape does matter. There's a spectrum from functional to aesthetic teapots. Functional teapots have a larger lid to body ratio. Barrel-shaped pots where the lid is almost as big is much easier to get tea in and out of, but pots with smaller lids and seamless lids offer a more aesthetic look, but it does make it a little bit more challenging to get the tea in and out. Then you have a low flat pot versus a tall pot, which definitely are affected by the type of tea. But with the right filter and spout combination, the body shape matters a lot less. A lot of times it matters more for marketing, and if you like it, then the practical implications for why it matters. My nemesis has returned. A question I get asked second to only one other question, and we'll talk about both of them in the video. Do you have any pots with ball filters? All right, whether the filter is a separate ball that's attached on the inside of the body, or if the holes are pressed out on the side of the body, doesn't matter. If the same potter had the same amount of skill and time invested in both, yes, the ball would be better. But here's the thing. If your teacher specifically does the wall or the net filter on the side of the pot, you're gonna be way better at that than if you try doing a ball filter, and vice versa. Also, the structure and shape of the little pooch and the size and placement and the pattern of your filter holes matters so much more. And largely more than 30 years ago, people weren't using filters at all. It was just a single hole, but the tea leaves didn't get plugged. Why? Going back to what I said in the beginning about filters, if you spend more time with it, you get better with it. Finding the right angle of the spout, the right shape of the body. With a pot that didn't have a filter, artists were still able to create amazing pours. So yeah, the filter definitely matters, but which type it is does not matter. So you can't just look and say, oh, this is a 7-hole, this is a ball filter, this is a wall filter. That doesn't matter at all. Oh my goodness, this pot is not heavy at all. A 1-to-1 ratio is an evenly weighted pot, but not evenly balanced. So if a pot holds as much in milliliters as it weighs in grams, it's not heavy and not light. If you get a pot that's 20% lighter, it is going to feel extremely light. If you get a pot that's 50% lighter, meaning it weighs 50 grams and holds 100 milliliters, that's featherweight category. That's super light. In fact, these are kind of between that. These I think are 70 grams and hold over 100 milliliters. So we're over 30% lighter. So whether a teapot is light or heavy and somebody trying to say that that matters is totally marketing and based on your feel or sensation. There's no quality associated with weight, except it is harder to throw lighter, but not too light. We'll talk about that in a minute. Speaking of a pot being lightweight and not mattering, if you guys like this pot I'm pouring with today, it's called the Mongol Drum. It's available in our store. It's one of Master Huang's lightest pots that we have from him. Typically he's made us chunkier pots like the Don't Make Waves before, but if you want that classic Qinzhou softness in the hand and a really lightweight teapot, go check it out. But what matters more than weight and more than any other factor, because it's almost the composition of all these other factors combined, is balance. There's a saying about Yixing pots, right? The most famous city in all of China for teapots, that if you hold the handle, it should feel evenly weighted in your hand. There's another balancing factor that to me matters more, and that is where the pot naturally wants to fall. When you hold different pots, they'll have different falling points, but any pot worth its weight will be less than 90 degrees. And you can control this with the height of the handle, which basically destroys everything we said in the line of symmetry in the beginning. But not if you were listening. I said it affects where the balance point ends, and that's true. But if you want it to balance in different positions, you just move it up. Handle positioning is far from the only part of balance though. This took a while. As you make a teapot lighter, every 5 to 10%, it becomes significantly more noticeable to the person holding it. And so if you're making lighter work, you want it to feel grounded. But for a true master pot, it feels perfect, not only in balance and weight, but when you put it on a scale, it goes well below that 1-to-1 ratio. It wasn't until we put this master pot that Derek got from his tea master on a scale after using it for years that I realized that the capacity was 20% more than what it weighed. And it's because the balance was perfect. It encompasses the symmetry lines, the weight, the thinness of the walls, the shape of the pot, everything is summed up in balance. But Art, you haven't talked about clay or price. The first question that I get over and over and over is, I wanna get this teapot, but what tea is it suitable for? It doesn't matter. If you like the pot, you're gonna like the tea you brew in it. There's this book that I remember reading in grade school, and I don't know why it sticks with me, but as the story basically goes, the book progresses and the person realizes they actually have to do less and less and less until the point where they're sitting and doing nothing, and that's the only way to be perfect. And it's the same thing with teapots. You want a perfect pot? Get a porcelain guy one. But if that's all you have, you're gonna lose out on all the character of different pots because you weren't willing to try different teas in them. And it's not as simple as this clay is good for this type of tea. Firing temperature and how close it was to vitrification. If it was reduced, because that makes it less porous and less interactive with the tea. The type of clay, the shape of the pot and how it retains heat, and the pouring speed, which also affects the heat retention, all are encompassed in clay. Don't worry about it in the beginning. If you have 5 to 10 pots, start testing stuff out. Let's talk about price, production, and mastery all in one. So the production, or the way that a teapot is made, can either be slip cast, which is mold made, half handmade, or fully handmade. We don't have time to get into what each of those are in this video, but if you are not getting a half handmade teapot, if you're getting a mold made or slip cast teapot, just get a gaiwan instead. Because you're gonna lose the character, the essence of being a handmade pot in it being slip cast. And that's what makes teapots interesting, is the fact that they're intentional decisions from an artist. Mastery is kind of like a subset of production method. So when we hear the word master, it just sounds elevated. But China has a pretty rigorous scale in terms of being a city level, provincial level, or national master. A large part of it is based on skill, but some of it is also based on influence. How much money you have. Can you go through and afford to go through the process? So saying someone is master, and especially not qualifying it, what level master in what city, like it's all different, makes me start to wonder. So what I would look for when you're looking for a teapot is, do they talk about the different types of mastery, or do they have pots at least at different price points? I see this all the time with tea too. A company has 10 different types of this one tea on their website, the person buys the cheapest one and then they give critical feedback, and it's like, well, you gave feedback on the cheapest one. Of course it's gonna not be the best. That's why there's a price range, right? All right, I gotta go drink more tea.